Thank you, John. This is, yes, I'm going to try and make this as amazing as I possibly can. So it's going to be a bit of a different one from some of the others you may have attended, should I say, earlier in the day. Actually, I was just participating in Fabricio Laguna's Agile session, and I thought it was interesting, some of the things he was talking about, creativity, etc. And so there's a nice tie-in to what I'm going to try and lead you into and try and get you intrigued by, at least today. And the idea of moving to embodied decision making, there's a beautiful sculpture in the UK that you can actually see on that slide there. And sometimes I think we're a little bit like that. We're kind of pixelated, you know, coming through on the Star Trek, being taken from one place to another. We're not kind of present. And the idea of this session is, yes, I have some slides to share with you, but I'm also going to be leading you, I hope, through some interactive exercises. So you're going to be moving around if you possibly can, standing up, if you've got a little bit of space. Hopefully you're not in a cafe or a restaurant at the moment watching this, which might make you a little bit self-conscious. But the idea is that, you know, you can talk theoretically about embodiment, but the best idea to hammer it home is to experience it and to move our bodies and see what happens. So,
Mark, sorry to interrupt you, Mark. Can we go back to the QR code for a moment? We have a few latecomer attendees.
You'll be able to, when I get to the questions, if I get to the questions, you'll be able to scan them again anyway. But if you get a chance to do that, do it now.
Go ahead. We had a few people who said they needed a chance to scan it. Go ahead and scan that right now.
Oh.
There it is.
I thought you were saying go ahead and keep going, John.
Okay, done. Mark, we are ready to proceed. Over to you.
Done. Good. So I'll skip over that because hopefully you know why you're here. What are we trying to do? So learning objectives in these 45 minutes is really to gain access to new sources of information, which I think you'll experience in the next 40 minutes or so. Become aware of the role that our bodies actually have on decision making, and hopefully acquire a new way of approaching problems, because we tend to sit down and try and logically and use Excel spreadsheets, etc., when we have difficult, challenging problems to take on. But a question like, you know, should I build a new team, or should I use my existing team and hire somebody, etc.? The answer to that question is not in an Excel spreadsheet. There's no calculation. You know, should we buy this company or not? You can do all kinds of calculations to find out. But then sometimes it's just, it feels right? It feels like the right thing to do. Should we hire this person or that person? We can look at the CVs. We can have a look at all kinds of algorithms to check the CVs. We can do interviews. Some people might tick all the right boxes, but when you come out of that interview, you just say there's something that doesn't feel right? And some people will write that off, right? And say, no, this is what the statistics data says. This CV is the best. Let's hire this person. And someone else might say, well, maybe there is new sources, different sources of information that we can either say it's not valid, it's subjective, and hence somehow not as valid as something written down on paper, that maybe we can do a little bit of CYA a little bit later as to why we hired this person, right? We can explain it. But if I say, well, he just felt like this was the right person, there was going to be a great fit, that's a little bit more difficult to justify further on down the road if needs require. So the idea of leadership, and I work with a lot of companies at the moment. I'm working with, the biggest steel company in the world, one of Canada's best managed companies, leading organic energy drink company in Canada. So I'm working at kind of the top in terms of trying to take strategic planning decisions, right? That's what I do, facilitate strategic planning, facilitate strategic decisions. But the key part often in those meetings when we're getting together with executive teams is kind of related to the idea that listen, I can go to lots of museums and look at paintings, and I can go to museums in Paris and New York and Toronto and Halifax, etc. And yes, I'll learn more about painting. I can also take a course, right? Lots of people take art courses, aquarelle, sculpture, etc., etc. But the quality of my next piece of work, I'll be faced with a blank screen, right? Or a piece of clay. And all my training and all my looking, going around museums is thrown out the window because all of a sudden it's me in front of a white canvas or in front of a piece of clay. And so what the work represents me, right? Just as much as my training and everything else. Same thing with a project manager, a business analyst, etc. I can measure some of the results. There's lots of quantifiable ways of measuring outputs. And there's lots of courses for project managers on leadership, etc., etc. But if everybody takes the same courses, particularly if they're all online, they're all on MOOCs, they're all free, what makes the difference? Ultimately becomes to you, right? In the moment, do you have access to all the information? You've got all the knowledge, you've got all the spreadsheets, etc. But ultimately, it comes back to you, the individual. And that's often the thing that's the most difficult thing to look at. It's our blind spot. We think by taking another course, by visiting another museum, we might get better. Or putting another OKR or KPI in place. But it really comes back to us. So that's what we're going to play with a little bit. Your state of being, right? How can we enhance your state of being, your presence, your awareness to take better decisions? So obviously, we all listen to our brains, right? I've been through, I'm still teaching university. So, and a university is a place where education, kind of the logical, rational thought is developed, etc. But we also recognize, and you can see the little heart here in this diagram is actually pumping. It's like when you're trying to get buy-in to a decision or become creative, a lot of it is about feeling. How do you feel about this? And getting engagement and commitment and loyalty and all these kind of things. Those are not intellectual things. Those are emotions. And again, some of us are more attuned, some are naturally attuned, some of us write them off. And it's the same thing with the gut. Some people, a lot of entrepreneurs in particular, rely heavily on their gut. Sometimes it works, sometimes it not. But what we're trying to do as project managers or business analysts is take all the knowledge and training that we've had, but then kind of integrate it into, yeah, but what's our body telling us? What's our gut telling us? What's our emotions telling us, right? Because there's so much data there which may make us make a better decision, right, than just listening to our heads and taking the answer that the spreadsheet gives us. So, and again, we find ourselves in situations as we take decisions, you know, my head's saying one thing, my heart says another, my gut, I didn't sleep well, or some people actually feel bad digestion, right? And my body tells me something else and it just doesn't feel right. You can be sitting in a meeting and the way it's going, it's like, this doesn't feel correct. Intellectually, we're following the agenda, etc., but there's something off somehow. And again, we can either acknowledge there's a lot of wisdom there, or we can write it off and just put that aside. We don't bring our emotions to work, etc. We're here to use our brains. So, and there's lots of science behind it, right? There's so many connections from our gut to our brain, from our heart to our brain. There's so many drugs being stimulated that potentially there is so much wisdom and knowledge that we can either tap into or not. So what I'd like you to do is think of a big project manager, business analyst, kind of work problem, decision that you're facing where you feel a bit stuck. You don't know what to do, and write it down. And if you've got a couple of questions, think of a couple of questions, because we're going to do a couple of different exercises. But what questions are you struggling with where the data is not necessarily giving you the answer? Right. You're procrastinating eventually because it just seems this is tough. Or maybe there's somebody who just sees it quite differently to you, right? One of your key stakeholders. Often that's what happens when we have different situations. We might have a project manager, we might have a business analyst, we might have human resources, we might have a finance person involved. They all see it differently, and we kind of get stuck. So what I'm going to do is, I hope you've all written something down, because we're going to work on that. And this is where we get more into the invitation to play around a bit, because we rarely take big decisions alone. Even the CEOs of this world, they consult with the board, they consult with their VPs, they might consult with customers, they might take the decision alone, but they don't really, they've been through a consultation process. And there's always a stakeholder who sees it just completely different to us. It might even be somebody who always sees things different to us. So how can we understand where they're coming from? And again, how can we use our bodies to help us do that? So I'm going to show you a little exercise called the two-step. And I'm going to show you it on screen first on a little video, which I hope is going to work. But actually, let me just show you this little video first, if it's going to work. That's my feet. In 2 steps, I can basically change direction, right? I have my left foot forward, I transfer my weight, and I swing around and see it from somebody else's point of view. And here, oops, this is my right foot forward. 1, 2, and I adjust. So this is where the fun starts, because I'm going to show you that. I'm going to ask you to do that, okay, around a problem. So I'm going to stand up. I'm going to ask you to do the same. Okay, I'll stand as close to sort of halfway through the screen here. And I'm going to think about a problem I have where I see it diametrically opposed to somebody else. Okay. There's somebody on my team, there's somebody in the department or the company who sees it differently. So I'm going to stand with my left foot forward. Unfortunately, I can't show you my feet given the layout, but hopefully you just saw how you can move. And just very quickly, if I move forward on my left foot, I take a step on my right, start turning and swing around, and I'm looking the other way. And now I have my right foot forward and my left foot back. And I can do it again. 2 steps, that's why it's called a 2-step. You basically swing around, do a little shuffle. Just try that until you're comfortable doing it. Don't be embarrassed. Nobody can see you. They can only see me. Left foot, right foot. Right foot, left foot. And now, hopefully you've mastered that, because what I want you to do is just stand whichever side you prefer and just think about the position you're in, how you see the problem that you're feeling a little bit stuck with, and really sense into it, feel it. How do you feel about that problem? Why are you feeling stuck? What's bugging you? What's making you angry? What's making you determined not to give in? What's making you question yourself? And really sense in to let your body feel it. So I can really feel and sense into how I'm feeling about this situation. And what I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to do, is just do the 2-step and turn around. And now imagine that you're looking at yourself and you're that person who has that completely opposite point of view to you. And now see it from their point of view, just as fiercely as you stuck to your point of view. Try and see it through their eyes from their position. How do they see it? What's bugging them? Why are they seeing it different to you? And try and appreciate why they see it as they do. What do they think about you? How do they see you? Why do they see you are stuck in your position? And shake it out, let it go. So, yeah, I'm a dance teacher. So let me share my screen again if I can. And John, tell me if it's the wrong version that you can see. So what we've done is just do the two-stick. How do they see it? Could
Wrong
you
version, Mark, please.
Wrong version?
Yep. Go ahead and hit your display settings.
Yeah. Any better?
Not yet.
Now?
Not yet, Mark. Not yet.
Okay, I keep switching things, but well, actually, let's do the QR exercise, and then maybe I can readjust.
Sure.
So what I'd like on the QR, you're on the first slide, you'll see that the active poll is what's changed when you think about that problem now. What has changed? Anything or nothing, maybe? How do you see it? How do you feel different about the problem? How do you feel differently about the person who sees it differently? Good, we got a few people typing, but walking in their shoes, we can appreciate things a little bit better. When I walk in someone's shoes, I tend to feel a little bit less animosity. Yeah, maybe it feels like we don't understand why they see it, but we've got questions where we can actually reach out to them, have empathy. They do. Often people have different challenges. They're not bad people, they just see it differently. Maybe their KPIs are different, right? Or their OKRs are different. And it's a very simple exercise to do that you can do in a washroom, you can do it in your office, you can do wherever. You might just, you're not looking for answers necessarily. You're just looking for openness. Instead of feeling stuck, potentially, you've got possibilities. You've got an idea. I'm going to ask them this. I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to look at that data differently and see it from their point of view. Right. So that's kind of what we're aiming for with this exercise. It's nothing out of this world to use our bodies as a tool to help us take better decisions, right? In work, it often feels like that because we get stuck in a desk or we're in a boardroom or even worse. And it's like, that's why when I'm doing strategic planning exercises, people are always moving around, because just moving around allows people to be more creative instead of being stuck in rigidly in their chairs, etc. So I'm going to stop my share a second and just see if I can get back onto the right. Let's see. John, again, tell me if this works or not. How are we doing?
Mark, it's looking beautiful.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further. I'm not sure we're going to get through all this, but we'll see what we can do. there are many body dispositions in actual fact. Obviously, our bodies can move around in almost infinite variety of ways. But many years ago, I trained with a guy called Julio Alaya, and he helped me get a framework together by really narrowing things down really to 4 different dispositions. Actually 5, I guess, if you call being centered and present and in kind of a very 100% active listening, active feeling situation when you're in a meeting. And the idea then is there are 4 different body dispositions that potentially we have access to. And stability is the first. Whenever I think about stability, as you can totally tell from my accent, I'm originally from England. The Queen of England represents stability. She's just been she just celebrated 70 years in power. And I mean, during world wars, during Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, Boris, etc., the royal family, which is really the Queen, brings stability. And the only thing she does is wave and smile, etc. But that's her role. And sometimes bringing stability when the team is panicking is really important. Openness, being warm, soft eyes, embracing, welcoming people. That person who had the opposite point of view to you about your problem. When you sit down in a meeting with them, how can you be open to them in order to create an energy of openness so you can actually have a healthy discussion instead of getting into a win-lose battle? Right. Flexibility. I'm unstuck, willing to change, take risks, willing to be wrong, etc. Again, in meetings, this happens. We can choose to say something which we're not sure how it's going to be received, or we can decide to keep it to ourselves. It depends often whether we are willing to risk people laughing, people saying, oh, we don't do that like that here, etc. And also resolution. I'm determined. I'm moving towards my objective and nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to deliver this project by the end of the week, right? And even as I say it, you probably noticed my voice changed. I sat up straighter, though you can't really see me very much. My body disposition was very different. So stability is when all hell breaks loose. I can bring a little bit of calm into the space. Openness is being able to engage with people, right? Reach out to them, embrace them. Flexibility, there's kind of 2 kinds. One is the flexibility we see with the woman there. But for me, often the most important thing is the one on the right, the Harlequin. Are we willing to be foolish? Because again, if we want people to be creative and agile and try different things, if we're not willing to say something a little bit out of the ordinary and have people laugh at us, etc., no one else will. And you'll stick with the status quo. And resolution, right? I'm powerful, I can do this. We are going to do this, etc. So again, I'm going to invite you to participate with me. I'm going to stand up again. And I'll invite you to do the same. I'll look at the screen, I guess, but just stand there. I don't like the way my head's kind of half cut off, but that's life. If I can go but a little bit, there you go. And just imagine there's a whirlwind, there's a storm, there's an argument going on, and you're able to stay in calmness. And I can actually walk around, and I'm kind of walking around like the Queen of England. I can walk very calmly in a state of stability. Nothing's going to knock me off center. My worst enemy in the office, they can say something that usually pushes my buttons, and I'm just going to, it's like water off a duck's back. It's not going to bother me. And now I can move into openness, which means I can look at the screen, and even though I can't see you, I can look into the camera and engage with you and be inviting, right? Give you the space to do anything you want to do, to talk to me, whatever. And that takes a particular awareness on my part to know when it's the right thing to do. And again, particularly if I'm dealing with somebody who I know they have opposing position to me. You know, the classic union and the management. You have them sitting opposite each other in the meeting often. And it's like, how can you break that? Because otherwise you're just going to get that. And it's always interesting when you can get people to actually come and sit next to, and even somebody with the opposing point of view to you, instead of being against you, they come and sit next to you and you look at the problem from the same side of the table. It makes a huge difference. So I can be welcoming with my eyes, with my smile, with my tone of voice, with my body language. Now, I can also, if you remember, we talked about flexibility, which is making a fool of yourself. So now I'm going to make a fool of myself by dancing in front of you, and hopefully you are doing the same, okay? Because if you can't do this, your team can't do this. So dancing around might seem a little strange to do, but your energy changes, your possibilities change, and maybe if you can get entire teams making a fool of themselves, when you sit down and have a conversation afterwards, the conversation is going to be very different. There's nothing worse, nothing can go worse than dancing in front of everybody and making a fool of yourself. And then there's resolution. Resolution is, again, we'll stand up. Resolution is, we're doing this. And my jaw can tighten, my fist can tighten, I can get in a runner's position. I'm going to do it. And nothing's going to stop me. Sometimes I need access to that. Just the same way I need access to openness, flexibility, stability. So again, I'm going to try and share my screen a little bit, if I can. Takes a second or two to get set up, but hopefully it's worth it. Centered.
Mark, we are perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So the 4 body dispositions around centered. You know, I have an image somewhere of Usain Bolt when he was 100 meters champion, world record holder. It was a great example on the start line, however brilliant he is. If he's somewhere else, he's thinking about what he's going to, a conversation he's going to have with his wife that evening, or what the kids are doing, or his next meeting, or he's texting at the same time as being in a meeting, he is not going to win the race, and neither are you, right? So the idea of being centered and having access to these 4 different dispositions is what makes a real project manager, business analyst into a leader. We've got all the data, we've got all the tools, etc. But what I have also is access to calmness, welcoming people. I'm willing to change and listen to people. And also when it's needed, I deliver. And you can actually walk through, and if we have time at the end, we'll maybe walk through the decision-making processes. But when you're taking a decision, often when you welcome people, you need to be open. Sometime all hell will break loose and you'll need access to stability. If you want to listen and be creative and maybe be challenged yourself, you're going to have to risk being foolish. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to say, listen, we're going to do this. Right. So hopefully you all have a greater or sometimes lesser access to this. And of course, there's the opposite of these, right? Instead of calmness, I can be the person who loses it in a meeting. I'm the first one I just can't, and I just explode, right? I can't put up with this anymore. As opposed to being welcoming to other people, I can be closed to other people, difficult to approach, difficult to engage with. Opposite of flexibility is I'm stuck, right? Everybody knows how I think about this position, this decision, and I'm sticking to it, and nothing is going to change my mind. And procrastinating is the opposite of resolution, right? I'm just not getting to it, etc. I'm not delivering. And we all fall guilty to these as well. And, you know, I'm losing it. Famous films, we learn very young, right? We lose it. And sometimes it's when the boss calls and we have a complete panic attack. Closed, it can be to broccoli, or it can be to other people. And I'm stuck. This for me is often the worst one. It's my way or the highway, or I build such a small little box in which I live and work and take decisions and which I find acceptable that it's really difficult to be a great team player. And I'm procrastinating. I don't deliver. You know, I'm always guessing myself, etc., etc. And then coming back to center, as opposed to being absent or the invisible man, etc., and thinking about something else and not being present with my team around the decision we have to take. So, again, few questions for you. Are you guilty of falling into the red? Do you lose it? Are you perceived as being closed? Are you perceived as being, sometimes it's good to be opinionated, right? Have strong opinions, but if you've got strong opinions and can't change, you're not changeable, it's not really worth engaging in conversation with you. And do you deliver? Do you find yourself procrastinating and taking, instead of getting into that resolution mode, let's just do it, right? So which of the four dispositions are most difficult for you? Just think about it. Is it openness? Are you naturally closed? I am often. In social situations, in networking events, I find it very difficult to go there. Sometimes I can have my ideas and I can feel myself digging in my heels, right? And which have you learned to rely on? We're all pretty successful in what we do. And one of the challenges we often face, and I know with a lot of people I work with, they often get stuck in resolution mode. Deliver, 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 deliver. And often in the work environment, we have to do that. But sometimes that is not the appropriate disposition. Sometimes you have to take a step back and be welcome and bring stability and be open and be creative. And if you're in decision-making mode, that resolution mode at the wrong moment, you're not going to get great results. Oops. So again, little exercise on the QR codes if you can. Which is most difficult for you to access? The anonymous, but feel free to vote. Do you have difficulty accessing stability, difficulty in accessing openness, flexibility, resolution, or is the most difficult actually returning to center? See what you can be willing to share with us. So resolution is winning as being the most difficult. Stability and flexibility is the least difficult. Then we've got a couple. How do we get back to center? And sometimes it is returning to center is just taking a breath, right? Just stopping and taking a breath. Okay. So it is interesting that if you struggle to get in resolution mode, And I've actually worked, many years ago, I worked with a woman, and she was just entered into the senior executive ranks. And she was struggling to be recognized around the board table, basically, around the executive table. And partly it was because she was open, she was flexible, but actually embodying resolution was really difficult for her. And so part of the kind of coaching I did was to encourage her. I got her to take her high heels off, in actual fact, to have her feet really flat on the ground when she went in, and then to sit in a position of resolution. And people saw her differently. She spoke differently. She behaved differently. So the body can actually lead. Right. And again, openness, you can learn to be more open. I always say, if not having access to those 4 different body dispositions equally is not a problem for you in your life or your career, don't worry about it. But if it is, then start working on it. And the body can lead. So letting the body adopt flexibility, cracking jokes, etc., be willing to make a fool. Just do little tests in low risk situations, and then start practicing it in more difficult situations. Returning to center. Take a breath. Literally, the answer is take a breath, take a time out. It might be 30 seconds, it might be whatever, between meetings, between your projects, etc. Come back to center. So we just got more or less 5 minutes left, and I want to do you a little exercise. Again, I'm going to risk ridicule here. This is revolutionary, right? I teach in the McGill University. In academia, this is revolutionary, because if you said it's not the head that's important, it's the body. Right? So if I listen to my body about a decision, instead of listening to my head, try and stop that. What more information, wisdom might I get? So I'm going to share a little example with you. Actually, I wrote it down here. I'm in the process of deciding whether I should teach at the university in the fall. I've got about a week to decide, I guess, before I have to decide, do I teach or not? And I don't know what to do. And there's no Excel spreadsheet. There's nothing I can plug in. I can look at the pros and cons, etc. But that's not going to help me take the decision. So I'm going to ask you to help me take the decision. So what I'm going to do is literally just let my body speak. I'm going to try and stay on camera, so it's not going to be perfect. But I'm just going to let my body embody how I feel about this dilemma I have. Do I teach? Do I not teach? And then I'm going to ask you to just write in the chat, what do you see? What do you feel when you look at me doing whatever happens? So it's going to take a couple of minutes. So do I teach in the fall at the university or not? So again, I get centered, I close my eyes, so I forget about you, I forget about my head, and I just think about teaching in the fall and let my body express something. So that's what my body has to say. I'm really firmly rooted to the ground. You can't see my legs, but you can see my arms stretched out, my body shape, my head down. What does that tell you? What do you see and what do you feel? What does my body express? Just write it in the chat. John, you want to read out if there's anything in the chat?
Indecision, uncertainty, undecided, apprehension, Can't tell if you're running to the challenge or running from it. Pulled in a few different directions. You're feeling stretched. You're stretching yourself to teach in the fall. Protection.
See that, just that feedback is really interesting information that I couldn't have got in 30 seconds by talking to you about it. And just for time purposes, there's a lot more work we can do on that. That's kind of the beginning of an exercise. But just for time reasons, what do you get from that experience? Again, just write it in the chat. How do you see you might use this? What do you see the challenges are to doing this? Because there's a whole field around helping with decision making, really listening to. When I talked about embodied decision making, that kind of work, as you saw, very quickly you can get a lot of information that you cannot get. We could sit down and talk for hours about teaching and how long I've taught and etc. All this, how I feel about going to McGill, all this kind of stuff. Meaningless. That information you gave me is so powerful feedback for me to help me process it. It's not necessarily giving me the answer, but it's helping me understand it. So, any feedback? Actually, in the chat, we've only got a couple of minutes about the 4 body dispositions, the 2-step when we switch positions, the idea of embodied decision making, that last exercise. Anything you'd like to share, or any learnings that you've got for yourself about how you might bring more embodiment into your own work and decision making and project management and business analyst work? So pay attention to others, embodiment for sure. We talk a lot about body language, but that's it. For me, body language is a communication tool, right? The actual idea of allowing the body to lead, I've got a couple of master's degrees, etc. My brain's still pretty good working order, but I tend to ignore a lot of the power of actually letting the body lead, and then my brain can follow. I can't cut my head off and stop thinking. I've been trained 60 years to do that. But allowing myself to get access to a lot more information maybe can help me take much, much better decisions. Yeah, I will decide which of these areas I want to work on before entering each meeting or each big decision. And those 4 body dispositions, they can be really useful throughout business decision-making processes. Coming back to center. People get burnt out. I mean, this isn't a session on work-life balance and stress, but if you come back to center, close your eyes and just take a breath. You'll be ready to go to the next session that starts in 15 minutes. Right? And you're not building and accumulating all through the day until you're tired out. You're going up and coming back down, going up, coming back down at the appropriate times and having some balance. Great. So I'm going to go into the wonder session just for a few minutes. So if anybody wants to come and chat about any of this, I'd be happy to share or listen more and share some more ideas if anybody's interested. But other than that, I think time is up, John.
Yeah, Mark, I thought that I was going to be comfortable in my chair, sitting back, but you had us doing the 2-step. You had us up out of our chair and thinking about our bodies. Mark, now it's time for you to direct your attention to the chat. I want everyone to share their appreciation here in the chat for Mark. Let him see how you felt about today's session. So thank you everyone for that. A reminder, of course, every session has an evaluation button on the website. Make sure that you head to the website when you have time, click evaluate underneath this session, and make sure that you share with the organizers how much you enjoyed moving your body and embodying decision-making according to Mark. Mark, look at all the appreciation in the chat. You have made an impact on us today. Thank you so much.
And my body's smiling, or my face is, and the rest of me is as well.
And we all see that. We all see that. Thank you to you. Everyone, the next session here in 14 minutes is actually a good lead-in from Mark's session. It's building emotional fitness to lead during difficult times, presented by Hans Ekman. We'll see if we can bring our embodied decision-making into building our emotional fitness. Mark, once again, thank you very much. Everyone, signing off. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the sessions.